He's fooling himself, and he's self-righteous, and he thinks he's better than everybody else. What is there an advantage to being a Jew? And then he answers immediately, or what is the benefit of circumcision? Verse 2, great in every respect. First of all, that they were entrusted with the oracles of God. Now remember, Adam and Eve, they were not part of the Jewish nation. Okay, the Israelite nation doesn't come about for a very, very long time. And we know that it was a set-apart people. It was God's chosen people. And we're going to get into a little bit about how we can tell they're God's chosen people even to this day. But he's talking about this is great in every respect, because through the Jewish people, through the Israelite nation, all the law and all the prophets and the oracles and all of these wonderful prophecies about the Messiah and all that stuff, all of that came through that tribe, through that group of people. So it's hugely important. That's enough, he's saying. So it's typical of Jewish writing. And here's something that was interesting to me. I don't know that you can make that out really, really well. That is a pie chart. And I believe all pie charts should have whipped cream. I'm just telling you that. That's a pie chart as of 2017, Nobel Prize winners. Okay? There have been 902 individuals who have been given a Nobel Prize as of 2017, of whom 203, or 22.5%, of people who receive Nobel Prizes are from the Jewish nation. Okay, the big blue area, that's Christians, okay? And then the orange section or brown section or whatever, that's, okay, and you're thinking, well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that the Jewish population comprises less than 0.2% of the world's population. This means the percentage of Jewish Nobel laureates is at least 112.5 times, or 11,250% above the average. Does that sound like a blessed people to you? Like they think of stuff we don't think of. Why is that? Well, because they live off over there. No, it's because they're God's chosen people, and God has blessed them throughout the years. Have they always been faithful to God? No. Has God poured out his wrath on them from time to time? Yes, he has. But look at how he blesses them. You can pull up just about anything. Just Google, advancements in medicine by religion. You're going to find that there's a lot of people there that are Jewish, that are coming up with these incredible things. We know the Israelite nation comes up with some pretty incredible weaponry, okay? Is that just because they have to survive? Probably, but it's also they're a blessed people. An extraordinarily high percentage of young American scientists come from Jewish homes. A survey conducted by Fortune magazine, one of America's leading magazines, has established. The survey carried out among 87 outstanding young scientists who distinguished themselves in nuclear physics as well as other branches of science show that 29% of these 87 outstanding scientists are Jewish. 53% are Protestants, 5% are Catholic, while the remainder come from homes where they don't claim any particular religious thing. Jewish scientists also constitute about 30% among 20 of the leading young scientists engaged in important scientific work for General Electric, Bell Telephone Laboratories, other American industrial enterprises. The survey established. So I'm just trying to say, if Paul was talking today, he goes, so is there any benefit in being Jewish? Well, yeah. You're just being blessed to be people who are thinking outside the box, and you're being so creative. So the nation of Israel remains a chosen and blessed people. All right, verse 3 and verse 4. What then? If some did not believe, their unbelief will not nullify the faithfulness of God, will it? May it never be. Rather, let God be found true, though every human be found a liar, as it is written, that you may be justified in your words and prevail when you are judged. This is one of those things, excuse me, hold on. How many of y'all think Paul is just the easiest person to follow when he's writing. Am I the only person who's going, Paul, dude, English, come on, dumb it down a little bit for me. But remember, he's asking all these rhetorical questions. Okay, so is there any benefit in being Jew? Well, yes, there is. Well, yeah, and the prophets and all this other stuff. Well, what then? If some did not believe, their unbelief will not nullify the faithfulness of God, will it? What he's saying is, how many times did the Israelite nation turn its back on God? A bunch. How many times did God turn his back, his faithfulness, away from the nation? Well, there were times where he would withdraw, but he's never said, okay, you're no longer the chosen people. You're out of the herd. His faithfulness is not hinged on my faithfulness. Christians, this is awesome news. His faithfulness is not based on our faithfulness. I think that's what Paul is just simply trying to say. That what if those Jewish people have walked away or whatever? May it never be. Rather, let God be true. Now, when that word true, it's like God cannot be true. God is true. He has no other option. He's always going to be true. Though every man be found a liar. If everybody was a lie, it wouldn't matter. That you may be justified in your words and prevail when you are judged. But he is choosing to bless Israel based on his faithfulness, not hers. Verse 5. But if our unrighteousness demonstrates the righteousness of God, what shall we say? The God who inflicts wrath is not unrighteous, is he? I'm speaking in human terms. Now, again, like, okay, rhetorical question. I get it. Okay, fine. But if our unrighteousness demonstrates the righteousness of God, he just said their unrighteousness didn't make him become unrighteous. As a matter of fact, their unrighteousness just proved how righteous he was because he didn't turn his back on him. He remained faithful. So doesn't it make sense that I should go ahead and be unrighteous because it makes him be even better? And Paul's saying, no, that's not it at all. It's like, because every time I sin, God gives me grace, which means that he's even more graceful. Shouldn't I just sin all that much more so that God can just be that much more graceful? No, that's not what we're going for here at all. It's just the fact that God is faithful. His righteousness is not dependent on my righteousness. His faithfulness is not dependent on my faithfulness. One of my favorite stories about obedience, and I think this is really what this is talking about in many ways, is a friend of ours back when we were young. His name was Rocky. Believe it or not, his name was Rocky Wrestler. And Rocky was this big old guy, not as big as you'd think having the name Rocky Wrestler, but one day he was in his living room and he noticed that a light went out in the lamp. He went over, he turned the light off, or he thought so, how would you know? And he unscrews the light bulb, and then he goes to the kitchen to get a new light bulb to put in the lamp. Now his son was probably about 5 at that time, and his son was sitting there watching TV or whatever, and as he's going out of the room, I wish I could remember his name, but he said, hey, look, whatever you do, don't go stick your finger anywhere near that light socket because you'll get hurt. And so he makes it around the corner into the kitchen, and he begins to look for a light. And he hears his son begin to cry. And he comes back around the corner. What's wrong? And the son said this, I'm so afraid I'm going to stick my finger in that socket. How many of us, that's us. God says, hey, look, this is not a good course of action for you to take as a Christian. This is not my best. This isn't the target. Do not go there. This is not, remember, the bumpers are up. I want you to have complete freedom, and I want you to have complete freedom, so I put up bumpers so that you can have complete freedom in the safe zone. And we're like, I'm so afraid I'm going to step over that. I'm so afraid I'm going to, some of us, that we bring that on ourselves. So our unrighteousness demonstrates the righteousness of God. Even when we stick our finger in the light socket, he's still there. The God who inflicts wrath is not unrighteous, is he? So sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes we see people who get extremely upset because God has all these limitations. Man, being a Christian, man, God just takes all the fun out of it. I mean, you can't do any of the fun stuff. You can't hang out with the fun people. You can't do all the fun activities. It's just horrible, horrible, horrible. He won't let us do anything. And then there's a tragedy. And they'll go, man, God is so awful because he made all these tragedies happen. And so God, it's like, how can we blame God for everything? Ravi Zacharias, many of y'all know who he's an uber genius Christian speaker, and he was asked one time, why does God allow bad things to happen? And his answer to me was just epic. He said, okay, and Ravi apparently likes Paul because he likes to ask a lot of questions when he gives an answer. And he said, well, let me ask you a question. When should God stop stopping things? Okay, you want God to stop the rape, but do you also want God to stop a lustful thought inside the person's mind who will eventually commit the rape? Well, no, just stop when it gets really to the really bad point. Well, to God, it's all bad point. Jesus said just when you do it in your mind, it's the same. It's the same to him. So do you want God to stop everything? Or do you want God to stop just the things that you, and how many of us know that even if we took if I polled the audience here and said, okay, where should we stop on this particular subject? We probably are going to have more than one answer, right? So in other words, God is like, okay, I'm giving you freedom because I don't want robots. I want children. I don't want slaves. I want children. And we all know that our children have certain freedoms. And as they get older, you do what? You give them more freedom. And eventually you're going, man, why did we have kids? That was just simply for me and David. So when we are unrighteous, God is still righteous. God has chosen Israel to bless, but Israel was unrighteous. While God can and has punished Israel's unrighteousness justly, that doesn't mean that he has become unrighteous in his wrath. I think that's mostly what I draw out of this, what I've listened to, and everything that Paul is saying. Look, even when we're unrighteous, even if God did pour out wrath, his wrath is never done in an unrighteous way. His wrath is never unfair. His wrath is never unjust because of who he is. So another thing that the Holy Spirit kind of threw on me this week as I was thinking about this whole thing about keep the law, keep the law, keep the law, keep the law, and it goes in with this next scripture. But what if I just decided, for the health of it, I've just decided that I'm going to always stay on the Daniel fast. It was really good at the beginning of the year. I stayed on it. I got used to it. I lost some weight. I felt better. I had more energy. I'm just going to stay on the Daniel fast. And I happen to work in an industry now where, and this isn't true, I'm just making a story for you guys, okay? I work in an industry where majority of my clients and customers are Jewish. So for business reasons, I'm going to start attending temple on Saturday and hang out with them. And then, it just so happens because I was born in the 60s and 70s in South Florida, the doctor circumcised me without asking my permission. So I actually could say, look, I follow the law. But I don't follow the law because I'm following God. I follow the law because, eating the right diet is better for me. And if I go to this place, it's going to get me an opportunity for business. And so I'm kind of working that angle and things I had nothing to do with. Some of these people were so proud of the fact that they were living by the law, they didn't realize their very heart was just completely wrong. He goes on to say in verse 6 and 7, may it never be, for otherwise, how will God judge the world? But if through my lie the truth of God abounded to his glory, why am I also still being judged as a sinner? Questions, questions, questions. God can only be true. God can only be just. He can only be pure. He has no other option. May it never be, for otherwise, how will God judge the world? It's laying out the whole picture here of, could God be wrong? Could God unjustly do anything? Could God unrighteously do anything? And the answer